What can we expect from the Seattle Seahawks in 2025 as a team? All right, everybody, happy Sunday. We are just a couple days away from the Seattle Seahawks giving us new stuff to digest and talk about. We are just a few days away from the veterans reporting to the VMAC, and therefore a few days away from actual training camp practice. We're going to find out some injury stuff. We're going to find out in some cases, you would find out if a player's holding out or not participating because he's not happy about his contract, although that's pretty unlikely to happen this year because we don't have any players in that situation. And we'll actually have new, evolving, consistently changing content to go through. We just have a couple more days of this stuff where we're kind of doing like the prepping for the season work, and then we'll be there. So if you're bored right now, if you want more Seahawks stuff, then just wait for a couple more days and we're there. But we have one more prediction video to do, and then we're going to call it good for the series. I'll do another schedule prediction at the end of the preseason, but this is going to be the last specific prediction video, I think. Maybe I'll do one more where I predict like the whole league, but that kind of stuff, I don't feel like people are that interested in that kind of stuff, to be perfectly honest. I think that once you start talking about the whole league, you definitely get into the territory of having a lot of people who are like, I don't really care about the rest of the league. I care about the Seahawks. So I don't know if I'm going to do that, but this is going to be about the team. How does the team perform in certain metrics? How does the team perform in certain overall statistics? How does this team basically have everything come together numerically in a way that adds up to roughly estimating your win-loss record? Now, I think that this team, in terms of these numbers that we're going to talk about in this video, are mostly going to do pretty good. Now, as we've seen, doing good in these areas does not guarantee that you're actually going to win a lot of games. We've seen teams, actually, I remember in 2010, the Chargers had the #1 offense and defense in the NFL and still missed the playoffs. That's like the all-time example, but there are other examples like that too, where sometimes this stuff does not add up to wins, but it's a good starting point. We're going to do the offense first. We're going to start with yards per game, and we're going to do two things. We're going to do the yards, and then we're going to do what I estimate the ranking versus the other teams in the league will be. So that provides context, right? Because the number by itself doesn't really tell you anything. Everything is relative to what other teams are doing. Yards per game, I'm going to go ahead and reveal that here. Went with 356, not a crazy high number, a little bit better than last year. I don't think this is going to be one of those high-flying, greatest show on turf type teams. I don't think we're going to be piling up monster numbers the way a team like the Detroit Lions will, or maybe not so much recently, but in recent years, the Kansas City Chiefs have. That's just not really going to be the formula this year. But I'm going to say 356 total yards per game, and that's going to rank about 13th in the league, slightly above average. Really, if you don't want to be overly pedantic about it, it's average. I think that's probably about right. I think that our personnel overall is below average, but I think that Kubiak is going to do some of the heavy lifting here. I think the defense will put the offense in some good situations where they can perform a little bit better than their actual talent level. So 13th is about right for me. Passing yards per game. This one, I went with 226, which doesn't sound like a lot, and it's not a lot. In fact, if you were to compare it to other teams, it would just be 14th. So essentially average. And I wasn't sure about this one either, because it would be very easy for this team to be below average if they're going to be a run-first team with a below-average set of pass catchers and a really good set of running backs and a probably mediocre quarterback and a probably pretty bad offensive line. Again, we're hoping that Kubiak does the heavy lifting here and can lift the team up above their talent level. And we're also hoping for some improvements with some of these players. Like, we need Abe Lucas's health to improve. We need Christian Haynes to improve. We need maybe Anthony Bradford to improve. We need these things to start coming together so that we can have even this. I know this doesn't seem like a lot, but if the formula that this team has put forward comes together the way that it should. Remember, by the way, when you're doing passing yards, you're taking out sack yards as well. And I do think we're going to give up a fair amount of sacks. And Darnold, I believe, averages a slightly above average amount of yards lost on his sacks. So that has to be taken into account here. But I think this is about right. Rushing yards per game, I went with 130, which is obviously, it's nothing compared to the best teams in the league, right? Ravens, Eagles, we're not going to get there. And I didn't have it going too high. I think that'll be about 9th in the league. I feel like we're going to have a good rushing attack, and I think it'll be helped by the fact that the defense is going to be good. I just don't think it's going to be elite because I don't think our offensive line is going to be good enough to enable that. I think if you want to be truly dominant in the rushing game, you can't be having a well below average offensive line. You can be good. You can be maybe even really good, but I don't think you can be elite. Maybe these players can improve enough to where they enable that, but I'm going to go with 130, which would be about 9th. And then points per game, I calculated it out. And by the way, a lot of these numbers are directly taken from my previous videos in this series. 25.3, which I estimate would land somewhere around 11th. Not quite top 10, but above average. I wouldn't call 11th in the league in points per game good, but I would call it above average. And that should be enough. It won't necessarily be enough. There's more that goes into a calculation than just number of points scored. That's just part of the picture. But if this team can rank 11th in points per game and they can avoid, how should I put this? I mean, they can avoid really hanging the defense out to dry with some of the situations in which they don't score points, should be enough for this team to be good. Now, it wouldn't shock me if the offensive line held them back from getting above 25 points per game, but remember, there are going to be occasional points that are either scored or set up by the defense, and that does get counted in this area. Total giveaways. The good news is we don't really have fumblers on this team, right? K9 doesn't really fumble. Charbonnet doesn't really fumble. We have good ball security in our running back field. And the one guy on this team who did fumble at an above average rate, DK Metcalf, even though he only did it a couple times a season on average, he's not here anymore either. But Sam Darnold is a guy who will turn the ball over a good amount. So at the very least, there are going to be opportunities. So I came up with about 20, slightly more than one a game, 15th in the league. That would be, based on recent league trends, that would be right about average. It's really nice having running backs that almost never fumble. Or in the case of those two guys, they haven't lost any fumbles in their career, I don't think. So that's been great. I just think that Darnold is the kind of quarterback who cannot help but risk giveaways a good amount. 20 sounds about right. Average sounds about right here. Third down conversion. This is an area the Seahawks have not been good in for a very long time. I think that Kubiak can help, but I don't know if it's going to be great. I went out with 40%, which would be 13th. Call it average, slightly above average. Hopefully, we're in third and short a lot, and we can run the ball, and we don't put third downs on our offensive line, because that's been the main problem in recent years, and it's been pretty much every year. The offensive line has to pass block on third down because most of the time on third down you throw the ball, and if the offensive line doesn't block, the play has no chance to get started. And in order to get it even up to 40%, which is not that high, we're going to need to see some real progress in the area of third and short. We need to generate 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, not 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, 3rd and 25, 3rd and 13, 3rd and 11. Fourth down is kind of a random stat, honestly, because teams don't go for it on 3rd down that often. But 54%, 17th in the league, about average. That's almost like a random number, honestly, because with a few exceptions, most teams don't go for it on 4th down more than once a game on average. And I don't think the Seahawks team is going to go for 4th down very much. I don't think that we're going to be a heavy 4th down team. I have to believe that this team is going to play it cautious because they're more about running the ball and playing defense at this point. And offensive penalties, I said 60. I said the team is going to commit 60 offensive penalties on the season, which would probably be a pretty high amount. 22nd in the league. And remember, first would be the fewest because that's what you want. It's a new offense. We have a new quarterback. We have a new wide receiver, or starting wide receiver, I guess. We have some new offensive linemen, at least one. And I can't imagine all these things coming together in a way that isn't occasionally messy. You're going to have mental mistakes. You're going to have players that are just kind of overwhelmed physically. It's going to happen. Hopefully it stops happening so much by the end of the year, but I think 60 offensive penalties in a 70-game season is about right. I'm hoping things can clear up by the end, though. And that's your offense. It's a slightly above average offense overall, statistically. And I think that's all we need to be a good team. I don't know if this is enough to be a Super Bowl team, but I think this should be something we can at least work with. Again, these things are not guaranteed to translate directly to wins, but they're at least a start. Now we go over to the defensive side of the ball. Let's start with yards per game allowed. I think we're going to do well here. I went with 316. Pretty bold. Well, I don't know how bold it is. The team played at an elite level for a good chunk of the second half of the year. But even then, there were bad games. But I think it's important to remember that in the modern NFL, even the best defenses have bad games. You don't see teams like the 72 Dolphins or the 75 Steelers anymore. You don't see stuff like that where they just dominate pretty much every single game. That doesn't happen. The NFL basically doesn't allow it. But 316, I think that would be a good mark. 6th in the league would be roughly where that lands. It'd be borderline elite, not quite elite. I don't think we're on the level of the best defenses. And also, the defense is going to be somewhat dependent on the offense. And while I think we'll have a good rushing attack, I don't think it'll be an elite rushing attack. So the vision that we have in our head of a rushing attack that just allows us to dominate time of possession and give the defense time to rest on the sideline all game, I don't think we're there yet. It's not far off, though. Passing yards per game allowed, I went with 201. I think this is going to be an area of the team that is elite. I think we're going to be top 5 in passing yards per game allowed. Now, some of that will be situational because the offense isn't going to be great. There are going to be teams that don't feel the need to throw the ball on us a lot because they're playing from ahead and they're trying to protect a lead. But at the same time, the other side of that is I look at our players. I look at our pass rush. I look at our front. I look at our corners. I look at our safeties. And I believe that this is a group of players that is really going to do a good job holding other teams down and making it hard for them to throw the ball. And when you include sack yardage, because I expect this team to be very, very good in the area of pressuring the quarterback, it should be right around here, I believe. 201. Rushing yards per game allowed, I went with 115, which would be 10th. Not as good. And I have a feeling that teams are going to view our run defense as the part of the defense that is a little easier to attack, because I'm not 100% sure we've got what we need at nose tackle. And I'm also thinking that the offense isn't going to be good enough to make every game a track meet where other teams feel like they have to throw the ball 100 times to keep up. So I think teams are going to be able to run the ball decently well. Maybe not for a very good yard per carry average, but for a decent volume. And that's how you get that. Still pretty good. Points per game allowed, I said 19.6, which would not quite be hyper elite, but it's on the cusp of elite. I had it at 5th. Going to be somewhere around there. I would consider top 5 to be elite anyway. I would consider 5th out of 32 teams to be an elite defense. And if we're doing that in conjunction with being the 11th scoring offense, that should be a team that wins more than they lose. Now, it's not guaranteed. Again, I want to stress that, but it's a very strong foundation. Total takeaways, I think we're going to do pretty good here. I went with 25. I think we have a defense built to take the ball away. 7th in the league. There are teams out there that print turnovers at a rate much higher than that. So I don't think it's going to be one of the best numbers in the league, but 25 turnovers over 17 games, that's about 1.5 a game. I'd be pretty okay with that. 3rd down conversion percentage allowed. This should be an area where the team does fairly well. I went with 35% because this is all about your ability to get after the quarterback. So I think they're going to be elite here. 4th, 35% would be one of the best marks in the league, almost certainly. It's all about your ability to get after the quarterback, and I think this team should be able to do that between their interior presence and their rotation at edge. It should come together. 4th down conversion allowed, again, kind of random. I landed on 50%, which would be about 8th. I mean, it's good. Now, don't get me wrong. 4th downs are very important plays. They're kind of hard to figure out what's going to happen on them because it's a small sample size. Like, this defense might have to face 20 4th down conversion attempts all season. I mean, you could push it a little bit and say it's going to be like 30. It's hard to really say much about that because it's just a handful of plays. It's not even one game worth of plays. And then finally, defensive penalties. I think this will be good. There's a lot of continuity on the defense. A lot of these players were here last year. They're familiar with the defense. Guys that are going to be a bigger part of the defense are players that were here last year by and large. Guys like Ernest Jones, guys like Tyrese Knight, Byron Murphy. There's not a lot of stuff that should be foreign to these guys. So 43 would be 8th in the league. Pretty good. Not elite, but there's nothing in this defense that I think should lend itself to committing a ton of penalties. All right. That's what I got for the team. Let me know what you guys think. That's probably the last prediction video I'll do. Maybe I'll do one more for the league, but I'm not sure. Anyway, let me know what you think. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks.